Annual City Council for August 6th will come to order. Please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
roll call, please.
Councilmember Alahi,
Present.
Councilmember Labube,
Present.
Councilmember Lupo,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler,
Present.
Mayor Turner.
Present. Terry, are there any changes to the order of the day?
Yes, there is.
I'm sorry?
His microphone doesn't seem to be working, unfortunately.
Mr. Zimmerman.
It's on, but it's not working. They're still finalizing the upgrades, and I apologize for the light is on, but I don't hear anything, so I'll speak about it. Yes, we have a request to move the item number 8 regarding the building use codes. If we could, to the top, we have someone that's visiting us that's presenting tonight.
We also have oral communication, so can we do oral communication first and then?
Of course, yeah, so it would be after the consent calendar.
Yes. Did you say before the consent calendar?
After.
Okay.
If the council is in it. The council is amenable to that.
You guys are amenable to it? Okay. Okay, so our first order of business is oral communication, and I have one card. And this is from Sue Craig. And agenda item, management of people.
So I would like to congratulate this council for one, not missing any meetings, hopefully, I think listed. The second thing is for micromanaging the team. So far, we have our city lawyer resigning. Now we have a city manager resigning. And I think there's a few books that I will recommend afterwards that you each read about micromanaging your team, enabling them to succeed, not to fail. That's my comment.
Thank you. I only got one card. You only have one card?
Oral communications.
Or can you-
No, I submitted one. I put one in the package there.
I have number 8.
Yep.
Reach codes.
Yep.
Okay, that's an agenda item,
Oh, okay.
so unless you want to speak under.
Nope, that's fine.
So that's it?
Yes, for oral communication.
Okay, so our next order of business is written communications, and I have 4. And I will read some of them when we get to each item. So the next one on the agenda is the consent calendar. And we have 4 items on the consent calendar, which we will take in one motion. Does anyone on the council wish to speak on any of these items? No? We have a motion to accept these items.
I have a motion by Councilmember Lupo. And second by Councilmember Alahi. You should be able to vote. Jeff, those Burns? So no Wiggins. Okay, Councilmember Alahi,
Yes.
Councilmember Labouvet,
Yes.
Councilmember Lupo,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler,
Yes.
Mayor Turner.
Yes. So the next item is item number 8, which is new business, the building breach code. So do we have somebody here to present?
Oh, you have,
Sorry?
Oh, yeah. You bet.
I'm sorry, but we did not test the speakers today. It was the one thing we didn't test, so please speak up.
Sure, and is there a ability for me to advance?
Just yell at me.
You got it. So my name is John Supp. with Silicon Valley Clean Energy. And first I want to thank the council for inviting me here to speak today. And I wasn't prepared to say this, but Terry, thank you much for all of your service. It's been great working with you as part of our monthly member agency working group. And we look forward to working with whoever comes in to fill your shoes. So sorry I wasn't prepared for that one, but here we go. So I want to start out by talking about this opportunity for cities to address things that relate to not just climate change, but also climate prosperity, and encouraging the use of building codes to support additional clean, safe, and cost-effective homes. And this is really what this talk is about today. So if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and go to the next one. So what do you want? We want to make sure that people understand what actually is maybe the building code itself, and then what is a REACH code, what is the REACH code and how it relates to that code. So we'll start there. Second, we're going to talk about just a little bit of background and a little bit of what else is happening in this field and with the other cities around us. And then finally, we're going to talk about why it relates to Montecito and why it might be a good opportunity for the residents and the city here to work on it. So let's go to the next one. There's a lot of animation here, Terry, so let's hopefully you can stay with me. So first of all, I think we want to start with just a discussion of building codes. Rob, who we've been working with for the last, I don't know, almost 8 months on this, he already has his stack of new building code books to go through. And you can see there's 11 of those books up there right now. You, the council, are already going to have to vote on these new codes. This is not the REACH code yet, just the regular building codes. There's already changes to the building code. Rob is actively combing through those. And that's something that you as a council are going to be seeing in the next 2 to 3 months. And so again, you have to go through this process of looking at the regular code. Let's go ahead and go to the next. What the REACH code allows you to do as a city is tailor some parts of the building code to reflect your values or the interests of your community. And what we're talking about here is not all 11, and not even all 11 sections of it. We're talking about a small section of the energy code, which is really just what is the energy inside the shell of a building. So if you think of like the shell of your home, what's the energy systems that are inside that home? So that's one piece we're going to talk about tonight. And then the other part is the Cal Green, that's chapter 11, and that relates to what kind of electric vehicle charging is required when you build a new building. So that's all we're going to talk about. The energy systems within a home, and then what type of electric vehicle charging might be appropriate for this area. So on. So again, I mentioned you can already get to do this. We talked about, go ahead, Terry. We talked about that the energy code, if you as a city are going to make a change to the energy code, so again, this is just the energy systems inside a home, it has to pass a cost effectiveness test. So theoretically, if you as a city said this code is going to cost $2,000 more than the regular state code, those $2,000 additional costs would have to be made up by at least $2,000 of additional savings on the utility bill. So whatever you as a council would pass on a REACH code has to pass that cost effectiveness test. All right? So again, it might cost a little more to build, but it's going to save more than that amount of money in the operation of the building. As we go to part 11, which is the electric vehicle charging infrastructure, the question is, in this case, it doesn't have to pass a cost effectiveness test. You could, as a city, require every home have 4 electric vehicle chargers built in. It doesn't have to pass a cost effectiveness test, and I'm not advocating for that. However, I do want to point out, installing electric vehicle charging infrastructure during construction is so much more cost effective than trying to do it after the fact. So a quick question here, I drive an EV, anybody else drive an EV? Anyone on council? Okay, I think I've seen you with yours. So again, if you have that home built to have that infrastructure, it's so much less expensive. It costs about 2 to 4 times more to try to retrofit buildings for electric vehicle charging. I'm sure you went through that same process when you put the electric vehicle charging station here in this, on this property. Let's go on to the next one. So quick question always comes up, why are we concerned about natural gas or petroleum and whatnot? I just want to start real quickly on the left here. It's a cars, transportation, natural gas, and electricity, starting in 2015. In 2017, SVCE started to serve customers You all established, you along with 13 other, or 12 other member agencies established us, and we started providing clean electricity to this area. In 2017, you can see that that number for electricity has dropped. The greenhouse gas emissions have dropped substantially because of electricity. But the bars for natural gas and transportation are essentially unchanged. Because again, primarily people are driving petroleum-powered cars, there's diesel for long-haul trucking, and so on. And there's still a lot of natural gas in buildings. Wow, okay. Let's just focus on a couple of pieces here. The dotted red line towards the bottom, that's the goal. California set a goal to be 80% below 1990 levels of emissions. That's that dotted red line. And you can see, even with the improvements that we've made on the electricity side, something has to improve on the natural gas consumption and the transportation side to ever have a chance for our cities to meet the goals associated with that. So, one more tap, Terry. You can see that big bar there that's still there for transportation, and one more for natural gas. Those two things, even in 10, 20 years, we have to make some changes that's going to get us on the track to meet our goals. And this is where we come back to the building codes. Thank you. So what's happening across California? Many of you have probably heard of what happened in Berkeley. Berkeley actually passed a ban on natural gas in new construction. To calm everybody's fears down here, that's not what's being discussed today. But again, that's what's happening in Berkeley. Not a big surprise. And then in addition to that, we're part of a large group of cities that are pursuing this. There's 50 plus cities statewide that are looking to affect this REACH code, right? Do something better than Title 24. More than 50 cities. On average, there's about 5 or 6 cities that typically pursue REACH codes. So this really is a major year for cities to really affect this type of change. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, PG&E showed up to support Berkeley's gas ban. So if you read very closely, PG&E also testified at that event and said we support continued efforts for cities to decarbonize and switch to cleaner electricity. Let's go on. So what's happening? So I wanted to share a little bit about this. It may be new to you, some of you here, but Rob, I know we've been working on this for quite a while, just making sure that he's involved. I know Councilmember Elahi has also been aware of this and attended some of the events to make sure that we're clear what's going on. And we've been sending summaries out to Terry, although I found out we need to update that to make sure you're still getting those summaries. But we've been working with the 13 member cities in here, 9 of whom have signed letters of intent to pursue REACH codes. Doesn't mean they're going to do it. It just means that they've told their staff, we want you to investigate this. We want you to figure out how this might work for our city. We've then been conducting a series of meetings, workshops, webinars. We've been meeting with city staff members. We've been meeting with various commissions along the way and doing things like I am today, preparing council for these types of discussions. And I just want to call special attention just for Montessorino. I understand you have a bit of a one-man show here, or one-person show, doing all this, excuse me. So it's been tough to get the meetings to work out, so I've been doing a lot of one-on-one and email and phone communications. So even though you don't see a lot of lines filled out there, still involved. Okay, let's go to the next one here. So we've also been putting together a series of tools to help people understand what's the cost effectiveness, what's the carbon intensity, what are the things that we're going to be saving. And I think what's really been, revelatory for me in this process is when the cities told us to investigate REACH codes, we said, okay, what we turned out when we started looking through the data is that all electric homes cost less to build than homes with natural gas for the inside the home, or we're talking what's inside the home. And they also produce less pollution, so they have better indoor air quality, and they're safer. So we ended up with sort of a really nice result for when we started doing this investigation of what are some of the advantages of having all electric inside the home. And I think we're going to cover that in just a little bit. So let's go on to the next one here. So we've also done some other stuff. We are not just helping to move this through adoption, right, and to council to get it adopted. We're also teed up with our consulting support to develop implementation tools, really in this case for Rob, to help him at the permit checkpoint, as well as the inspection checkpoint, as well as any training that might be useful to talk about what's going to be in this new code. So we're not just trying to get it through, we're also going to make sure the city's successfully implemented. We've done a lot of investment in this to make sure that this is successful. Let's go on here. So, I might be used to electric appliances and love them. I just want to give a quick overview of what we're talking about when we're talking about electric inside the home. This would be somebody that went all electric inside the home. EV charging, electricity for heat pumps for space heat, electricity for cooking, electricity for water heating. Okay, a lot of these technologies are very common and very familiar with some people. Induction cooking, I want to point out, we were just talking about this earlier. Neat trick with induction cooking is you can actually put a towel over the top of the cook plate, put the pan on top of the towel, cook, and all the splatterings of the food go onto the towel doesn't burn, and you don't have to wipe the induction cooktop when you're done. Some of these things that you just can't do with natural gas. So I know there's a lot of people that love their gas ranges, and we're gonna talk about a good solution for you to do both the REACH code and be supportive of people that wanna have gas inside the house. Let's go on to the next one. To help support this effort, we put together an all-electric showcase award. We've received 20 all-electric building applications already for that award. It's very exciting. I've featured a couple here today. These are electric homes, electric multifamily, and electric businesses. So I just want to let people know, these things exist, they're doable. It's not science fiction, it's not too far in the future, it's happening now. Let's go on to the next one, because now we're getting into the good stuff. So we talked about the advantages of using electricity, and I really want to highlight this. This code is about encouraging the developer to pick that pathway. It's not a ban, it's not preventing natural gas. It's taking the code, creating a slightly higher bar for people that use natural gas for cooking and heating, and we can talk about that more. So some people might pick the all-electric pathway. Okay. That's all it is, it's encouraging that. And I do want to point out about electric vehicles. 10 of the top 18 cities for adopting electric vehicles are right here in Santa Clara County. So if you look at the code for electric vehicles, it's going to be for the average for the state. Well, Santa Clara County is not average for the state. Santa Clara County is the #1 adopter of EVs in the state. So whatever the code says is probably a little low for this area. So if the code says 1, maybe y'all would think about 2. That's all. It's something simple like that. Let's go on here. So to be more specific, go ahead and click again. So we're thinking about we need a pathway for the all-electric side. And again, I want to point out, this is all electric inside the home. It means you can have on this first example, you could have a gas heat for your pool, a gas fire pit outside. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what's inside the home, okay? If you build a home that's all electric on the inside, what we're suggesting for the cities is no change to code. Just meet the code exactly as written. No change, no reach, okay? I want to pause there for a second, because whenever we think of reach codes, there's sort of this knee-jerk reaction. Well, that's going to raise the price. No, there's no change. If you use electric for your water heating, space heating, cooking, there's no change. Just follow code. Now let's talk about the dual fuel buildings. These are ones that are going to use a combination of electricity and natural gas. Okay, so we're saying you have to adopt the code, and here's where that little bit of a higher threshold comes in. Terry, go for it. So what we're saying is, and some of this is already built into the code, and some of this is in the REACH code. One thing would be to add a little bit of pre-wiring for future electrification. So if somebody does put in a gas range, we're recommending, as a high threshold for this code, that you would say, great, go ahead and wire it, so that in the future, in 5, 10 years, they can replace it easily with induction if they want to. And you can sort of see the trend in the state is moving more and more towards electrification and further away from gas. Another thing would be just to have a higher energy efficiency component. So if they're going to build natural gas, it requires a little bit better insulation, a little bit better fans, nothing too major. And finally, would be something to add solar thermal or battery storage. So what this does, some of these features I think people are already looking for and already adopting in their homes anyway. So it just codifies some of those basic behaviors and desires into the code. And so it looks at, again, it creates a slightly more favorable position for the all-electric side. Okay, Terry? On the EV side, we'll go this kind of quickly. I think Brian told me Montecito is a unique place, it's an exciting place, but it's really residential, really heavily focused on single family. So we can skip the things related to commercial and multifamily unless you're going to build new ones. In the code already, it just says, look, you've got to build at least one electric vehicle charger in a home. Okay? So for a reach code, what would that look like? Well, nothing too fancy. Go ahead and advance the slide. Just increase the quantity, or increase the speed, or increase the readiness. Like you're gonna require just conduit for a second charger, wiring for a second charger, or actually the charger itself. That could be a reach code. So nothing major, and probably very likely to meet the needs of whoever's moving into Montecito. Next slide. So I want to point out here, just from a timing standpoint, we've been working on this together with all of our with our 13 cities and the 21 cities in San Mateo County. So we've been working on this since January. We're really at this point where we've invested a lot. We've built the model code, we've trained up the city staff members, and now it's up to the council and the staff to sort of say, okay, now we gotta figure out, do we wanna review what a reach code would look like? And give that guidance to the staff to say, yep, bring it forward to council for a vote. So that's really where we're at right now. Next slide. So I think what I've learned since working with folks from Montecito is you're already demonstrating within your own community commitments to things like solar, electric vehicle, batteries, and so on. A lot of your folks are already living that. And by adopting a reach code like this, you would be, again, cementing that leadership and encouraging additional lower pollution, safer, and more cost-effective new homes when they're constructed. So where would we go from here? Okay. It's fairly simple. So I think one way is to encourage Rob to just keep working with us and say, yeah, let's take those model codes, put them into a Montecito specific way of doing it, and bring it to you for review and vote. Next, SVCE was approved by our board to give $10,000 to each city because pursuing a reach code costs money, right? It's your labor time, your work time. So there's a $10,000 grant available just to bring this to a vote for council. And in closing, last one, Terry. So tailor that reach code, bring it to council. You all get to decide if it works for you or not. But I think, again, we're asking at this point just to make sure that we're getting the blessing from you all, to have your staff keep investing time, to keep reviewing how to make a Montecito specific reach code that'll work for you. With that, I just want to open up for some questions. I covered a lot. Yes?
Yes. Will this apply to ADUs?
It will apply as your council decides, it will apply.
Okay, so if I have an ADU with no garage, does it have to have an electric charging station?
Okay, let's start from the get-go. Anything that's already existing this code does not apply. This code is only about something that will be newly constructed starting
Yes,
January
newly
1st, 2020.
constructed ADU.
Yeah. So I would
It's in the
work,
back of the house,
Mhm.
there's no access for a car. Do I need
No.
to install an electric charging station?
no, I would say no. So if there's no parking spot, there's no place to go to charge it. And again, I think all things as it relates to ADUs are going to be working together with Rob and other folks from your city to make sure that we design the right code for ADUs.
Can you clarify slide 9 that says that homes that choose to use gas must have 5 kilowatt hours of battery storage?
That's in the staff report.
I think it's on slide 9.
Let's take a look. All right, so, yes, right here. Okay. All right, so there are two primary ways that a developer can meet the code. One is to do an energy model, in which case they just have to meet a certain threshold in that energy model. They may or may not require batteries to get there. Okay? The other way that they can achieve that is called a prescriptive pathway, and that's just a checklist. And the checklist would include things like items that are more efficient, say a better efficient fan, better insulation, and then an option, which would be either something like solar thermal or battery storage. Correct. And again, that would be just the pathway for somebody who's picking natural gas to be inside the house.
Okay, but this, to me, looks like a penalty for those who choose natural gas.
Well,
Because 5 kilowatt is big.
5 kilowatt hour battery is not large. 5 kilowatt hour battery is just it's actually smaller than a standard Tesla Powerwall.
How much would that cost?
So we did the cost effectiveness study for the natural gas side, okay? And the total is about $7,000 more to build a home with natural gas into this scenario. And again, that's natural gas for everything inside, the cooking, the drying, the space heating, and the water heating. I think it'd be important to cover something that Rob has seen that we didn't get a chance to bring up in the presentation. There's a third option for a reach code. And the third option for the reach code, which I think may get to what we're looking at here, is to have a reach code that says, we're looking for electricity for space heating and water heating only. All other things can be gas inside the house. And the reason that's important is, from a sustainability standpoint, from a pollution standpoint, most of the gas is actually going to be consumed for water heating and space heating. That's fine. That'll still get you on a good pathway to meet any type of carbon goals you have, as well as creating safer and cleaner homes. But it would still allow things like gas cooking or other indoor gas features that people might want. So that's a good, I think for a lot of the cities, that's the position they're going to look for. Is not this highest level of reach code that you've seen here tonight, but that scaled down option that Rob has in the actual staff report.
You mentioned that after, if the reach code is implemented, any additional cost will be offset by the saving when you use electric appliances. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. I think this is a good, let's keep it up on this slide here. So all the things that are listed on the dual fuel side have a cost to them. And I'll just sort of go down the line. It's about $500 to do pre-wiring during new construction. It's about $1,500 for the energy efficiency, and it's about $5,500 for that battery or solar thermal. And so what this shows when we do the calculations on this for the cost effectiveness is that entire $7,000 or $8,000 of increased cost during construction will result in more than $8,000 in savings on utility bills over the next 10 years. So
You're replacing gas with electric appliances, not electric appliances costlier than gas appliances.
So-
as far as the utility bill is concerned.
good question. The question is, are they more expensive? And the answer is no, not always, and certainly not overall. And this is one of the big changes that's happened over the last several years. With the introduction of things like heat pumps for water heating, space heating, and air conditioning, you can now achieve both a lower first cost by using a combined heat pump for both heating and cooling of the home. You no longer have a separate AC and a separate furnace, so you get to enjoy that first cost savings. And second of all, with things like battery storage and PG&E's new movement towards time of use rates, leveraging your battery to keep you from using electricity during high cost times means you actually are going to enjoy a lower cost or an equal cost with electric appliances. And that's really one of the big reasons for inclusion of a battery in that scenario.
Are there any more questions from the council? None? So let me open it up to the citizens here. I see Philippa, but I don't have a card from Philippa, so I don't know if I'm planning to speak. But the first citizen here is Burton Craig.
Hello, Council, Burton Craig, and when I was on the council, I was part of the founding board of Silicon Valley Community Energy. And this is one of the most exciting groups that I was ever privileged to be a part of. And one of the things that we did once the initial grind of getting the business up and running was to take a look at where we actually made an impact. First, we came on board, we lowered the cost of electricity, we took greenhouse, we brought greenhouse gases down, and then we said, this is going so well, we were so far ahead of our plan that we were able to take a look at this even while I was on the board, and I was only on the board for 2 years. And as this plan started to come together and we went out and took it to the public, and just when I would speak to people about it, the thing that always interested me was that people kept saying, why can't we do more? How can we do more? Can't we legislate more in there? And I think one of the things that has made this plan very appealing is that there is not a big stick involved. There's not a lot of carrot yet, but there's really not a big stick component to it. This is a time for vision. I've heard you guys talk about you want to have vision, you want to bring Monte Sereno forward. This is one of the items that will do this for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next card I have is Ed Turner.
Sorry, Burton.
I know that.
I'm gonna have to take another position. I think this issue is a lot more complex than has been indicated tonight. And what I'm gonna encourage you to do is take it under advisement, maybe do a committee, but actually study it, get some people involved, get some answers to questions. You ought to consider this very carefully. We've talked about encouraging people to use electric appliances. Well, the way we're doing that encouragement is by punishing people who choose not to. If you want to have a gas appliance, if you want to have a gas heater or gas water heater or stove or something like that, if this thing is implemented as it could be, you're going to be required to go put in a 220 volt electrical outlet next to that thing, whether you need it or not. You may be required to put in electric charging stations for cars, whether you need them or not. You're going to have to give it if you want. It's to charge, if you have an electric car, it's not going to be sufficient for you to charge it with a 120 volt outlet. You're going to have to put a 220 charger in there. So there's a I think a fairly big stick involved in here. You're going to have to meet energy requirements that are 15% higher than your next door neighbor who might have used electricity. And I'm old enough to have seen these things go in cycles. I can remember commercials in the 50s and 60s where we were encouraging all electric homes, new thing, great, low cost, wonderful. And I can remember the same commercials in the 70s and 80s where we were encouraging the use of clean, burning, inexpensive natural gas. And now we're back to electricity. So where are we going to be in another 10 years? We don't know. And certainly this, if you are going to use all electric, yeah, you can save some money in new construction. If you're not going to use it, then you're costing your money. If you want to use a gas pump appliance, you're costing money for new construction. I think that the idea of saving cost with all electric appliances, you're going to have to prove that to me. I'm an engineer. I look at data. California has some of the highest electricity rates in the nation. I read just today that our average kilowatt hour rate is 70% higher than the rest of the country. And I compared that to my kilowatt hour rates, and my kilowatt hour rates are already 30% plus higher than California's average. So electricity is expensive. Gas is pretty darn cheap, and I've actually owned gas wells, and there's a lot of competition. We have enough gas to power the country's needs for hundreds of years. It contributes to energy efficiency, and it's probably always going to be an inexpensive alternative. So if you can make an argument that gas is more expensive than the electric rates we have in California, I'd be happy to listen to it, but I'm skeptical. So that's another reason I think it needs to be studied. There are a lot of reasons why you might want to use natural gas. If you ask my wife, she's going to tell you that it's a lot better for cooking. I looked at the expense, but something else that came up for me last week was, I'm sorry? To hurry, I need to get out, okay. Disaster preparedness. We got told last week by PG&E that we're going to have to, if we get into a fire conditions, we're going to have to deal with cutoffs in power for 2 to 5 days. 2 to 5 days. Well, if you've got a gas stove, and if you've got a gas water heater, You can still cook for your family, you can still take showers, you can probably still live in your home. If you're an all-electric home, you're probably gonna have to get the hell out. You're probably not gonna be able to stay there. So I am just I'm going. I am just encouraging you to take this under study and not push this thing tonight. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so, do I have a motion? Oh, you're gonna. Brian Mikachuk. Mikachuk.
Hi, Brian Mekachuk, 17509 Via Sereno. I wanted to address a couple of the issues that John raised, and maybe Rob didn't say anything, but I was part of Silicon Valley Clean Energy Customer Program Advisory Committee last year. I was a volunteer for doing that, and I was probably about 16 months or so that I spent doing that. But one of the things through that process, I ended up speaking with Rob, and we talked about the adoption rates of electric vehicles and how often people are applying for permits and how many EVs there are. And I think Monte Sereno actually has one of the highest densities per capita of EVs in the South Bay. Way higher than Palo Alto. The other thing is, PG&E is, as Ed Turner mentioned, they're gonna have planned outages. Well, now people are putting in, they're not being forced to put them in. They're actually putting them in because they want to have power. They want to be able to have their refrigerator running. It's great to have a shower, but it's also nice to have your food that's in the refrigerator that's cold. And then the other issue is, so I would ask Rob to speak to that. And then finally, with battery storage, there's a rate arbitrage opportunity. And that's what John had alluded to briefly, where you store power in the battery at a low rate, and then you use it up at a high point in time.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, we do see.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Did you want me to talk about how
Yeah.
many batteries, I mean,
Rob, you need to let the mayor decide if she wants you to respond.
So, and Rob, I cut you up.
yeah, so we are seeing a lot of battery storages going in, we're seeing a lot of solar,
It's not working.
Doesn't work, okay. So we are seeing a lot of battery storage going in, as Brian alluded to, also as well vehicle charging. So I think what we're getting at is these REACH codes, although they are gonna require those things, we already are seeing them voluntarily by many residents in Monte Sereno. I don't have the exact numbers here for you to provide that, but I can dig them up and tell you how many storage batteries we do, how many EV chargers we do per month, per year. I can provide you all that information if you like.
Yeah, I think it would be good to have, and this is for the residents as well, right? I mean, we need to go out to the residents and say, this is what we plan to do. We need to get a survey, we need to ask them, you know, is this what you really want? But I think one of the things that I would suggest is we do a study on the cost and the cost-benefit analysis. And, you know, what the impact of the revenue stream would be on our ADUs. Because we're gonna require ADUs to have, you know, we're gonna enforce more code. And, you know, in Monte Sereno, our revenue stream is highly dependent on ADUs.
I find the presentation, and anybody who's worked with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, I'm presenting Monte Sereno on that board. I mean, it's an excellent group of people, the staff and the energy they're running. I think they have all the information you want. I think they can submit it. And I think this is an easy way for us to make about $10,000. Because all you're doing is doing a letter of intent saying, yeah, we're going to look into it and we're going to do the research. What you finally adopt, codes will be customized for Monte Sereno. So if you don't want ADUs to have EV stations or whatever, that can be in the code. So we have all kinds of flexibility to adopt whatever code works for Monte Sereno, if I'm correct. So there's no penalty as such. You know, people are putting EVs at their homes. Monte Sereno has the best use of electric vehicles. I think it's an easy way for us to make $10,000, do a letter of intent, say, do the research, come back with what the numbers are, and give us what works for Monte Sereno. And then it's up to us to adopt the code. If we don't want to adopt the code, then we don't have to adopt the code. all I think we need to do today, if possible, is say, we are, interested in this. This is a way of saving the climate. It's getting rid of greenhouses. We're not adopting it, so any opposition that comes in will come in and say, okay, we don't like this part of the code, or we don't like that part of the code. But we need to get this procedure started. The state is already mandating codes that are changing. We're going to be ahead of the curve, and so people who are building now would benefit from the change. If we wait till the last minute and those codes hit us, then we won't have a choice. It'll be like anything else. We're sitting there and say, okay, now how do we go back and get the city to comply with the climate requirements? So I would suggest we should at least say, let's do a letter of intent and have all the investigation, and Rob can give us complete details and try to come up with a code that works for Montserrat.
I do agree with that. I mean, especially since California has historically driven the fight against climate change. And here in Silicon Valley, we sort of expect it's sort of a way of life for us here. And I think people moving here sort of expect it too. And it just makes sense. I mean, we're just simply providing something for a future buyer. And as a former realtor, that would make a house very sellable if it's already pre-set up for that option. So I think we should definitely pursue it and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, actually, the program is quite compelling, and, but I think and the fact that California is already leading the nation in setting energy standards, I think is also quite good. And we're on 3-year refresh cycles, and so, trying to push ahead when we have only a 3-year window to take advantage, ROI might not be so great. Furthermore, I think as Mr. Mekachuk alluded to, the adoption rates in Montesino are also quite high. We have very few homes that are being built brand new that would fall under these requirements. On the other hand, adoption rates are quite high. And so that means that there must be a compelling value proposition for doing this. I think the issue really kind of boils down more to, do we mandate it, or do we allow the homeowners and developers to decide on these standards on their own, because there's a compelling value there. And so I think that the Silicon Valley Clean Energy, they are out there promoting and pushing and educating with respect to what the value proposition is, and people are biting, right? They're actually out and doing this. I somewhat agree with Councilmember Elahi also that there seems to be no downside in studying a little bit further what the impacts will be, but I also agree that we didn't get a lot of response from the citizens, and whether we really want to try to mandate something over and above this 3-year refresh cycle, or it's really more the mandate portion of this and the effort that it takes to actually mandate. Maybe, Rob, you can comment on how much effort from the city staff will it be to implement standards over and above when you also have to keep up with this 3-year California cycle, which is already moving in a very positive direction.
There won't be any extra effort, in my opinion. I mean, we code cycle changes every 3 years. Codes change they'll drastically change every 3 years. But adding in a reach code is not going to affect my time or consume any more of my time. Initially, to get the code going and to do the research, of course, it's going to take some effort. I think that's why they offer the $10,000 grant to cover some of those expenses, which is a great thing that Silicon Valley Clean Energy is doing. But overall, maintaining it out in the field, inspecting it, in my opinion.
Councilmember People?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing here is a lot of good ideas. Certainly we can leverage what Silicon Valley Clean Energy has done, and most important, we're not voting tonight to impose anything on anyone. This is to study it and then to look at the different pieces that we can put into the code and to customize it for Montesino. So I think this is actually a great opportunity to put the issue out, which I think we all have interest in the greener future. That's one of the goals here. But more importantly, to bring in the citizen input and maybe make those adjustments and really address the issues of the dual fuel home, if that's what people want, to make sure that they still have that option. What is the penalty going to be for that? Put it in terms of a penalty, because that's how some people will see it for sure. So I think doing
Anybody else? The audience?
I'm sorry, I didn't get to sign.
Go ahead and say something, please. And this is Philippa Alves.
Yeah, I'm Philippa Alvis. Whoops, I'm breaking the
It
city.
doesn't
It
work.
doesn't work anymore.
It doesn't work anymore.
You broke it, it doesn't work.
Okay. I was surprised to see a lack of citizens here tonight. You're being asked to make a decision that is far-reaching, and you're being asked, kind of pushed, it sounds like, to make a decision quickly. And the lack of citizens here to hear this discussion is telltale. They don't know what's going on. And one of the things that we were really looking for with our last elections was greater transparency in government. This is I know that you've done a terrific job, and I love the newspaper that you're putting out in efforts to be more transparent and get information to people. But this decision should not be pushed tonight. You need to be getting this information somehow in surveys or something to all the people in Montecito. This is a major decision, and it's making a decision for people who aren't here and who don't know. Admittedly, they should be reading this stuff in the minutes, but people just don't do that, and all of you know that. You're totally aware that people aren't focused totally on defending themselves all the time. And I feel that this should be tabled until you can make a survey and be sure, a mail survey or something directly to people to let them know what's happening, because they don't know. And it's going to be one of those things, possibly, that you could be sued over again. And I think that we've done a really good job of moving forward in transparency, but there's no reason to be pushed into something like this. Also, the company the group that is pushing this will eventually be able to control the price, and they won't have any competition. And that's not really a great idea, although it sounds like it has many good aspects, but it is something that we should be thinking about. So I would urge you to table this and get back to the citizens directly before you make any decisions that is so far-reaching. Thank you for letting me know.
So, Rob, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think, just to clarify, we're not asking council to decide on the reach code tonight, as Councilmember Russo said. It's just to give staff direction how you want me to proceed. Do you want me to proceed with a couple different options of certain reach codes and come back to you all with it, so you can see which ones you'd like to go with or not like to go with? I think just to make it clear, you're not voting to vote on a reach code tonight, it's just to give direction to staff on how to proceed. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, so can we have a motion here that is very clear, that says we're not gonna implement the reach code, right? We're gonna do a cost-benefit analysis. We're gonna see the impact on ADUs, right? We're gonna get input from the residents. Is there anything else I missed, Councilmember Alai?
Right, three or four of you mentioned the letter of intent and the grant.
I think that could all be part of the letter of intent, that should look at doing a letter of intent. And we're not committing to do a reach code, rather than saying we're not gonna do it. We're not committing to do any reach code or make any changes. We will provide for the citizens to voice their opinions. And Bob can look into what would be a customized code changes that we could implement that would benefit everyone.
So, would somebody like to repeat that motion? Would dare repeat that motion? I think we got it, right? Okay. So,
You have the motion?
You're giving staff direction to conduct a cost analysis, do additional research, conduct public outreach, sign and send a letter of intent, but no commitments being made at this time.
good. So, do we,
It's just direction, it's just,
do we need to vote on it?
yes, you should. Yes, you should.
We should?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think our,
The motion and the seconds work. All right, we'll see if voting comes up.
Last time it was related to the wireless recycling.
Okay, so I have a motion by Councilmember Lahey. Second. A second by Councilmember Leopold. Did it vote?
I don't think,
No, you don't get an automatic vote.
so shall we just take a verbal vote?
No vote buttons?
None.
Councilmember Lahey?
Yes.
Councilmember Leopold?
Yes.
Councilmember Leopold?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler? Yes. And Mayor Turner?
Yes.
Passes by 0.
Okay. So we will now move back to the next item of business, which is public hearing. Right. Okay, so we have two, and we're gonna take them one at a time. So let me just say here, if any member of the public would like to make a comment on this item, please turn in the speaker card. Do we have speaker cards? I don't think we do. Okay, so let me go through some procedural items before opening the floor up. First thing we're gonna do is staff is gonna present a briefing on this item, right? And then the council members will be given an opportunity to ask questions. And then I will call on any persons interested in speaking on this item. The public will have 3 minutes to make a comment. Then I'll bring it back and the council will ask you any questions that they wish. And then I will close the public hearing and we'll vote on it. So, let me now ask, is it Jean who's going to make a presentation? Jean?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Turner, fellow council members, Jean Hamilton, city planner. It's my pleasure to be before you to present this variance request for 15827 Poppy Lane. And the request is for a variance to the interior side setbacks specific to the northern property line of the site. Typical required setbacks would be 6 feet at the first floor element and 10 feet at the second floor. The proposed variance request is to allow for a 5.5-foot setback and 9.5-foot respectively. This situation is a little unique in that the project did come before the council back in 2016. It was a 2016 application. At that time, for a variance to have a tandem garage versus side-by-side, due to the narrowness of the lot and an existing home, so it would make it easier to allow for that addition to be done. At that time, based on a survey that had been done, they believed they were meeting the 6 and 10-foot setbacks. As I mentioned in the staff report, there's been a subsequent survey which identified, unfortunately, an oversight in one of the monuments, and the new property lines resulted in the already constructed and final home, in this case tandem garage with second-story ADU, to only have a 5.5 and a 9.5-foot setback. Again, in staff's analysis, this lot is only 52 feet wide, which is one of 2 or 3 lots in that larger neighborhood and block to have that narrowness. Most others have at least 60 foot up to 70 foot width. And if you were to maybe look at a standard 10% of the lot width setback and apply it to this lot, you would, the 5.5 and 9.5 would actually meet that. So as you know, presented in the staff report, staff feels that the findings necessary to support a variance and that there are special circumstances uniquely related to this lot such that if otherwise required to meet the other setbacks would kind of deprive them of the same things that other properties are able to do. What I also put in front of each of you earlier is a written correspondence from the neighbors adjacent to the site of the north who would be the most impacted by this variance, and it is a letter of support for such a variance request. And those are the property owners at 15821 Poppy Lane. With that, I am available for any questions.
So are there any questions from the council? No questions? Okay. If there are no questions from the council, let me open it up to a public hearing now. And let me call Mr. Rick Mather.
Thank you, Jeannie, for your report. Hello, my name is Rick Mather. I'm a land surveyor. I work for Lee and Braze Engineering, and we did the original survey for 15827 Poppy Lane. Our boundary was based on available monuments that we found in the field. And soon after that, we were contacted by the neighbor to the north to do a survey as well. And this one included much more of a boundary survey, and we actually filed a survey with the county called a record survey, presenting our results and mapping them out for public viewing. Soon after we filed that survey, the neighbor to his north contacted another surveyor for a survey, and he apparently didn't really like what he was seeing for the survey, and he found additional monuments that we didn't find, which, when we reviewed his results, changed our boundary. We agreed with the other surveyor, which also impacted 15827 Poppy Lane boundary as well. So that's the reason why it was correct. It was the plans were for the original boundary with a 6 and 10 foot setback. The survey that was corrected and amended changed that boundary by 6 inches, and therefore the structure was out of code. So that's why we're requesting the variance. So this was not something that we did deliberately. It wasn't something that we intended to do. It's certainly embarrassing to us and to me personally to have to file a record of survey. I mean, to file an amended survey to change our results. It's not something that I like to see. It's not something I like to do. So it was entirely an accident, and we're asking for a variance.
Thank you. Do I have any questions from the council? No questions? So I will go ahead and close the public hearing.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion on the request for a variance for the primary structure in 15827 Poppy Lane?
So moved.
Second? Our stuff still doesn't work.
So I have a motion, I have a second. Councilmember LaBouvet? Oopsies.
Yes.
Councilmember Leopold?
Yes.
Councilmember Elahi,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler. Yes. Mayor Turner.
Yes,
Passes 5-0. Thank you.
thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's only been a year. Jeannie, thank you.
Okay, so let's move to public hearing number 2. We're holding a public hearing to consider the weed abatement report and assessment list. Is there anybody in the public that wishes to speak? Or do we have a staff report? No?
No, there's no staff.
No? So do you want to speak?
Hello, Council. My name is Coy. I'm the inspector for the weed abatement program for Santa Cruz County. That's because of Mo Common. In the assessment list that we submitted earlier, there were some changes since the report was submitted in July. Items number 1, 9, and 10 were rescinded actually. The item number 1, APN 409 43001, and 9 and 10 respectively is 510 21023 and 510-22-003. These parcels were found to have 3 years of consecutive compliance prior to this year. So at the behest of my manager, we did remove the $80 assessment fees from these particular parcels. So the new total that is for the assessment list is at $560 total for 7 parcels. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So does anybody wish to ask me a question? No?
Just one motion to be clarified. I guess there was a resolution that was attached, right, to the.
Yes, it's the first page of the document.
Yeah, so does that need to be modified to correct the amendment changes that they're making?
So in the motion, it would just be to approve the list as amended.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt resolution weed abatement report and assessment list.
I have a motion by Councilmember Leopold. And a second by Councilmember Louvet. They are, or they're not?
Mine's working,
They're voting?
but not for voting.
Motion button, second button.
So go ahead and.
Okay. Councilmember Elahi,
Yes.
Councilmember LaBouvet,
Yes.
Councilmember Leopold,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler. Yes. Mayor Turner.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Okay, so the next item is unfinished business. We have the amendment to regulations and guidelines for the conduct of public meetings. Do we have a staff report or does Councilmember LaBouvet wish to speak?
I'm just gonna say quickly that this came to the city council with two requested changes, and that went to the last city council meeting, and staff also required, with the other council persons they had, is to make any additional changes, and that no one else indicated any additional changes, so you can see in the staff report that staff updated the document to reflect the requested changes from their last council meeting, and that's what we have before you tonight is the amended regulations and guidelines for the conduct of public meetings for review and approval.
Okay, do I have any questions from the council? No? So do I have, do we do a motion here?
Yes, there's a resolution.
Yes.
Yes. We have a motion to adopt resolution amending the regulations and guidelines for the conduct of public meetings. Sorry.
I have a motion by Councilmember Elahi and a second by Councilmember Leopold. Councilmember Elahi,
Yes.
Councilmember LaBouvet,
Yes.
Councilmember Leopold,
Yes.
next item of business is city participation in community events. Terry, do you want to say something?
This was an item requested by the mayor to be placed on the agenda, and so we have placed it on there. It's basically a recommendation to discuss city participation in community events such as the Los Gatos Children's Christmas / Holidays Parade. And so staff placed it on the agenda as requested.
Yes, so does anybody object to being on the Los Gatos?
Is there a fiscal impact on it? Does it cost us anything?
No, the citizen across the street will provide us with a car, but sometimes he's not available. And so if he's not available, we may have to rent, but other than that, there's nothing. So do I need,
Any religious constitutional issues, person?
I think that the parade is intended to celebrate the holiday season, not any particular religious event. And so that would be something that the council could consider.
Councilmember Labuda?
Yeah, I think I have no objection to participating in these events. They're great for the community and we should show our support.
Okay, so Councilmember Law? No? Councilmember, no? Okay, so do we vote on this? We take a motion?
We're just looking for direction.
Okay.
In general, it seems that city participation in the year parade is a go.
Okay.
That's a good guess.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to city social media policy. So the social media policy was compiled by the ad hoc committee of Councilmember Luthold and Mayor Pro Tem Lawler with the city attorney's input. So now we'd like to see if there are any questions about it from the council.
Actually, the group drafted a policy and worked with the city attorney on it. And so what we're presenting tonight is the actual policy for review and potential adoption. Because we did actually include a resolution as well. If it's in what you were ready to adopt.
Yeah, I do have a question on the social media policy. There was a section in there that called for a representative for the social media post, and it wasn't clear who it was going to be. So I have a thought about it, a recommendation that I think we should consider. If we have an ad hoc committee representing the topic, then we should pick one of the two ad hoc representatives to do the post, let's say, on Nextdoor. So this way, there's no violation of the Brown Act.
It could still be.
Right? But then if there's no ad hoc committee, then maybe we should pick the mayor to do the post.
I'm sorry? Can you back up? I'm not even sure what you're referring to.
Number 3, under general policy, designated social media administrator, we haven't designated that person yet.
Yes.
Well, I think that would always be a city staff person.
Yeah, I think maybe we need to add an additional item.
Go ahead.
I think maybe we should add an additional bullet where we just clarify. I like some of the language that was in the Los Gatos code where they actually came out and says, and recognized the mayor as being a spokesman for the city. But in addition to that, we should add that the ad hoc committee expertise, so if there's any sort of subject matter expertise residing within the ad hoc committees, then those persons or those council persons should take the lead on the discussion and so that we don't overlap and have Brown Act violations. So is there some way that we can add something like that, or is you don't think necessary?
Liz and I worked on this, and there are really two different things going on in this policy. In the first part of the policy, we're talking about how the city handles official city communications. And so that is separate and distinct from the recommendation of how council members behave in their, or committee members behave in their public comments, which is something that we really actually don't have a direct ability to limit, but we, the committee working on this, are looking to provide guidance so people don't step on each other's toes, and so as to minimize possible Brown Act violations. So on the first part of it, I think to Terry's point, any official city communication, that's going to be within the city, and that's actually outside of the direct purview of the council. That's not the administration of the city's business. So in the first part of the policy, I don't know if anybody has any comments or wants to suggest any changes or needs to address anything there. In terms of the second part of the policy, which is the discretionary recommendations for how council members should behave, we began by pointing out that it is really, none of us can restrict anyone else's free speech rights, but then we're trying to put together some best practices because our experience, I think, as council members is the community wants more outreach. They don't understand why we're not participating on Nextdoor. And the reason we're not participating on Nextdoor actively on any controversial subject is because we don't have a policy to help guide us in that. And we've all wanted to be very, very careful that we didn't do something wrong or create serious Brown Act implications. So the guidance that's being offered here says, and there's a decision that we need to make in here related to this. And we're limited in our time to work with the city attorney on this and to really find out how far we could stretch our social media use. And again, none of us wants to risk getting in trouble, but we do want to stretch our social media use. And we've seen examples in other cities. Rishi Kumar on the water issues has really set the standard and said, I'm not going to be fettered by anybody telling me what I can and can't say in my public forum. Now, we want to be more careful. We're suggesting that we be more careful than that. And so we start trying to provide guidance in here. One, we put a disclaimer so that we can explain to people what we're doing and why we aren't having a large open discussion, why one or two people might be commenting primarily in a Nextdoor thread. And then we try to address the issue a little bit here. Well, we also address the issue of we may want to maintain our own Brown Act buddies list so we know who is talking about which controversial issues and how that's going on. And then we can all be aware of that as we go forward. What we haven't done is address that issue of who should take which issues and what happens if one council member is jumping in all the time and trying to control all of the public outreach on a whole bunch of issues. That's something that I think we all have to come back to our own policies and being polite to each other and looking at here. The primary question is going to be, can we have two people who are buddies have a kind of a hosted forum on primarily Nextdoor? Everyone else would have to stay away from that. No thanks, no likes, no commenting on that thread, or we would definitely be coming up with a Brown Act issue.
So, and in fact, you shouldn't even read it, because what that does is that third person now knows what two others are thinking, and that's a serial meeting of a majority of the council.
So that comes to the other thing, which is we've got some indications in here that if people are soliciting input and hosting discussion, they need to, best practices, be indicating that they're hosting that discussion with an open mind. They're not taking a position on the issue. I am pro these energy policies, or I am against these energy policies. It would be more, the council is talking about energy policies. We want people to come to the meetings. We want people to submit their thoughts on that. And we're not going to be prejudging this or taking these positions. So that's another of these best practices issues. People have the right to get out there, but what the city attorney is saying is expressing an opinion in a way that other council members hone in on, we know what your opinion is, has has Brown Act implications. And so it's very important. But we need to overcome this shyness about getting out there, and that's where Councilmember Lawler and I were working on this so that we have some guidelines that will point us to best practices, keep us out of trouble, but allow us to get out there into the public forum and start talking to people. So that's really what this is about. And if people have questions specifically, I think we need to look at fine tuning. One of the items in here, we've actually indicated a choice of whether we could have 2 people in a subject matter area working on this. And I think that's what came to me in the discussion was, would that be people on an ad hoc committee? Would that be 2 people who are already buddied up on this? Probably best to do that. My recommendation, I think, is that we leave it that only one council member would be hosting any particular discussion thread. Maybe someone else wants to open a different discussion thread, but that we should keep it to one council member until we have an opportunity to work more closely with the city attorney, find out some other best practices and how far we can push this without getting into trouble.
And just one point on that exact, if you're just hosting a conversation, a dialogue with the community, and you're not expressing your own opinion, you can all do that. It's when you start expressing your opinion, the mayor includes then her opinion, and the mayor pro tem then sees those 2 opinions, that's where you have a problem. But if you're just saying, we want to hear from you, we want your feedback, please come to these meetings, informational types of posts, then that's fine. It's when you start getting into the actual details of a specific project or specific issue and express your opinion that you could have a problem. The other thing I'd want to say too about this is there's really 2 potential issues that are implicated by this. One is the Brown Act, obviously, and the other is the due process. So, as we've all talked about, you are the decision makers. You have to keep an open mind, and you can't make up your mind until you have heard all the evidence. And so if you get on a social media site and you start giving out your opinion on a particular project or issue, there's a question about whether or not the applicant is being given due process. So those are 2 issues that the ad hoc committee is trying to thread the needle, so to speak, to give you the opportunities to speak, but not create potential problems.
This is a very, very complex area. I commend you guys for trying to put this together. But from what I'm hearing from Kirsten, it's almost like our hands are tied to keep our mouth shut. And just read it, what everybody else has to say, and just take it in. But as soon as one of us says something, and if anybody else reads that, or 2 people read that on the council, then we potentially violate the Brown Act.
So
How do you get around that?
Yeah, if only one person is posting their particular opinion, it's fine. It's when you have 2.
One person is posting, but 2 people read it.
That's okay, as long as those 2 people aren't talking to each other. So what you need to avoid is a situation where a majority of the council is able to either communicate directly or to have a serial meeting, so it's me to Terry, Terry to Councilmember LaPave. Those are the situations that you need to avoid. If you keep it at one person only posting, you're dealing in most cases with a potential Brown Act problem, but the content of the post could potentially create a due process problem. So those are the 2 issues that you
You express your opinion without having a public feedback on it. So even if it's one person posting, that's the issue.
that would be the due process problem, right?
So if I were posting something, let's say SB 50, right? And I put a disclaimer on it, the disclaimer that you have in your document. Can I say, and again, because I see other council members from other cities do this, they say, well, write to Governor Newsom about how you feel, or talk to Jim Beal about this. Can we do that?
You can do that on issues that are not before you for a decision. So you don't have, unfortunately, you don't have any decision-making powers on SB 50. So you don't owe anyone due process on that subject, nor is it something that the council will be making a decision on. So if it's not something that's purely under the city's jurisdiction, then you can say what you want, basically. If it was, for example, you got online tonight and you started posting about the REACH codes and said, I think this is a terrible idea, we should give people choice, whatever your reasons are. That's gonna be a problem because those codes will be coming before you in the future. So it has to be something that's within your jurisdiction.
But isn't also SB 50 code possibly gonna be in front of you in the future? Not that it didn't get canceled, but.
No, the impacts of it will affect the city, but you don't have any decision-making power on Senate Bill 50.
Yeah, so, I mean, if we were, take just a very direct example, if there was a variance on Poppy Lane, somebody could go online and say, there's a variance on Poppy Lane, if neighbors are affected by that, please come to the meeting and let us know your opinions about this. It would be better not to express any for or against because it's coming towards us. And so that's actually in item 5 in the recommended best practices. When posting about a topic that's either controversial or coming before the council or commission, the posting should remain objective, unbiased, and indicate that you're maintaining an open mind and will only make a final decision after a formal notice meeting. So again, we're trying to provide all of ourselves this guidance and reminders that we can come back to about what we can and can't do, should and shouldn't say. We also say if you have any question about it, your own postings, talk to the city attorney or the city manager to check on whether that's an issue that you need to be more concerned about.
And regarding that, I would just highly recommend that, if you adopt this, that you just make that a practice. Just give us a call and say, I'm seeing this and I want to comment, and we just speak enormously about that.
But I think it's important, I think we've, if we move this by taking out the alternative of 2 people working together on things, my suggestion is actually, originally I wanted that, the more talking to the city attorney, that we had some brief contacts about that. It looks like we should take that out until we have more guidance about whether we could really have some teams of people who are working on issues. And if we have those teams, they're going to have to be super aware of not expressing an opinion. Whereas if we stick to one person in any thread and hosting that discussion, we're going to be much easier to avoid the possibility that too many people are expressing opinions that other people are saying.
Brown microphone, but not necessarily the due process.
Right, due process,
Right.
we've got to all be aware of that. And this is going to be a matter of practice till we get it right, but we need to get out there and start doing these things.
And to that end, I would recommend on number 5, that language about remaining objective, unbiased, that you would repeat that under 6, because in 6, we're talking about if you are engaging in a discussion, we want to make sure that if it is appropriate to engage in that discussion, you're doing so in a way that's not prejudging or that's remaining objective. And so I would recommend that you include that in number 6 as well.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a pretty tight water. I guess you've got to walk through it very carefully. What I wanted to ask, you're talking about a city social media site as opposed to next door neighbor.
No, when we're talking about that, we're up in the top part of the policy. It's
That's-
very
that's-
black and white.
Yeah, but the city has a social media?
No.
It doesn't.
So
So that's just,
Someday.
we just use Nextdoor.
you just use Nextdoor, okay. Because I was just concerned that if we are setting rules on what can be posted and what cannot be posted, whether we then would have any liability because something gets posted and it should not have been posted. Since we, and that's the difference between whether you have editorial control or whether you're just a platform. So if you're starting to exercise editorial control, we need to be careful about whether we're screening everything or we're going to become liable for not doing that job.
And there are provisions in there for removing content if it's vulgar, things like that. There's certain circumstances in which it's appropriate.
But it may be too late, then if we already have it done by then.
Shouldn't be.
So we have to be careful about how far.
But that's,
sort of control.
right, so when we have an active forum, when the city hosts something where comments are a possibility, we've actually pulled this part, the first part of the policy here, in order to cover all of that. And that's really taken from a lot of the best practices. We plagiarized liberally from the best practices of many of the local cities here to pull that together. about what you can do and can't do. So we're ahead of this by one step when we finally open up some sort of city website. So we're ready to go on that. And then we're back to the issue of the council members and committee members we also covered as well, which was pointed out to us. So between, on City Attorney's comment a second ago, on 5 and 6, we were actually trying to use the same language to carry 5 into 6 when posting about a topic that is controversial or coming before the council and commission. We have the rest of 5. And then when you're engaging in a discussion on controversial or potential or which may come before, then we have this kind of next rule there. So I see this as a linear progression through here, that they are both addressing the same issue. Not a need to repeat what's in 5 again in 6 because we've just said it in 5.
In item number 2, the disclaimer, I know that we've got a lot of lawyers in the room, but any chance we can make that disclaimer just a little shorter?
So first of all, in the disclaimer, what's in the square brackets would be removed.
Yeah.
That was the alternative 2 language.
I was thinking that even if you went with the first 2 sentences and then just added, other council members may be limited in this discussion due to California Brown Act or due process restrictions. Or something as simple as that, no need to really explain it, just state it.
What I found, and the reason why it went as long, first of all, we thought you would do it, we would suggest doing it with an asterisk at the front of your post, rather than the disclaimer right up at the front of the post. Disclaimer, see below, and then put it at the bottom of the post, so it doesn't completely detract. But one of the reasons that I ended up as verbose, and Mayor Pro Tem Lawler as well, I think, about this, is because of the education factor, that we really need to educate people over and over and over again as to what the heck the Brown Act is and why we aren't all jumping in and having rough and tumble discussions publicly about matters that are coming before the council, because that's what people want us to talk about and they want to talk about. And so I felt that we need to explain, if you're not seeing the other council members, it's not because they don't love you and don't care. It's because they're not in this comment thread because we have set rules about that. So that, I just wanted that to be the message to be repeated every single time. And I think, this is a recommendation to include the following disclaimer. Nobody's saying if you do it, you're protected, or if you want to shrink it, you're not protected. So we're just trying to put that out there. But that was the reasoning for it.
And it could end up being a link. Your disclaimers link to a place on the website someplace, I suppose.
I think that's a good point. The disclaimer is there just to educate people. This policy won't insulate you from a Brown Act violation or the city from a due process violation. So you really need to self-police and remember the idea that your decision-making should occur in this room, and that any action that's taken or any discussions that occur should also happen in this room and not in a public forum.
Question, just a question. Once we pass the resolution on a subject matter, is it then open season for us to go ahead and discuss that on social media? I mean, this is, it's already come before us, we've already discussed it, passed
Yes,
it.
so
Then it's okay.
the variance, for example, someone could post about that and say, I'm so happy that we did this, whatever, and then everyone else could respond because it's already happened. There's no further, the only exception to that would be if it were something that were subject to appeal. You'd have to be careful. But for us, there is a possibility to reconsider items, but that doesn't happen very regularly. But Site and Architecture Commission, potentially things come back to them, so it could become a problem.
Okay, so I have a speaker card here, and I'd like to have that speaker come up, please.
I'm sorry, thank you. I just wanted to mention that I briefly looked at the agenda items previously, and I just perused it quickly again. And I know that we keep talking about the residents and their rights and the importance of involvement, but also as somebody new to the area and coming, I've seen a lot of, like verbal abuse and bullying of the council members that just seems very unnecessary, unprofessional, and really something that I want to advocate for you on your behalf. One of the things, for instance, when I attended a meeting, I saw somebody come up during one of the breaks and like kind of like towering over one of the council members in a disagreement. So that's an example. And then the other example has been on the Nextdoor app, social media, and I didn't see it in the items that you had there on how you would address that. And that's something that you probably should have some type of rules that you have, whether that be like closing the discussion, because I'll give an example. There was a posting about the city attorney leaving, and on the Nextdoor app, people are like, why is this? Who's doing is this? And the council members can't respond. And, but really, the city attorney, as I like dug into it a little deeper, I was thinking that the city attorney was a full-time position by the city of Montecito, but it's actually just a part-time position. And so that's like less alarming. Of course, there's gonna be an attrition that happens with every job. And so I think it would be better for you guys and for the residents if you had some clear guidelines to dictate that, so you could, present yourself in a professional way, and then also deal with this online badgering or bullying, or I'm not really sure what the agenda is, honestly. But anyways, that's a point I wanted to bring up. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And welcome to Montserrat.
I'd like to make a comment. Thank you. So, my parents came to the United States after my grandfather was assassinated for free press. And I feel, and I will fight this, that I should be able to say whatever I want to say. I shouldn't have to put up with anything that I feel that the council group has done incorrectly, such as bullying a prior council person, such as not facing constituents when you're making false attacks. Those things need to be addressed. And I'm very happy to be part of this country where I can say what I need to say and people can listen. So if you do put a process due so that we could talk about maybe censoring people, you bet I'll be out there, because free speech is free speech. So just wanted to add my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. So are there any comments about the first speaker with respect to adopting some of the things that she said on the code?
Yeah, well, to address that, we didn't talk about putting anything specific in the recommendations here, but I would point out to people that on Nextdoor, it's my understanding there, that if you are the author of the thread, you have the option to close comments on that thread if things get out of hand, and you need to exercise that discretion. The city starts out on anything city posted with no comments allowed, and that's normal, and that's a requirement for their agency postings that they do, because they are not allowed to interact with the Nextdoor in that way. So in our posts, if you're posting on Nextdoor and you have a thread that is getting out of hand, what you're going to be able to do is to close the comments if you're the author of that post. But I think at the same time, we've got to be aware that there needs to be an exercise of that. If you take on posting, there very well may be a variety of opinions put out there, and you're putting yourself out there in the public forum. No reason not to do that, but we're going to have to be very aware. We're also going to be limited in the back and forth that we can engage in. So obviously, we're not going to be in a position to defend ourselves, and at some point we may have to back away and then who loses? If that happens where we get pushed out, the citizens are the ones who lose out on that commentary from us. And maybe that's something that we end up talking about publicly. But for now, whoever hosts a thread does have the ability to not take down comments, but close comments when you
And just to clarify that, yeah, so if you are posting as a representative of the city, there are potential First Amendment violations if you remove comments. If you shut it down entirely, that may be fine, but you can't select comments that you like and don't like. So, that may be something we want to look into a little more specifically if you're acting on behalf of the city. And so there may be a difference between you as an individual council member being interested in a topic versus you as a member of the ad hoc committee seeking input from the public. So again, the more we talk about it, the more complicated it gets. But that is something that you need to be aware of.
And also the recommendation we have in here is if there's a controversial topic, we put this recommendation in to capture the comment threads. If that's something that you think should come before the council as a whole, if we're talking about a subject that then later comes before the council, you should capture those comment threads because the person who controls that is going to be in the best position to forward that to their city email so that it's captured as and becomes part of the record, or to bring it as written commentary and say this is something that I think the council should consider. Here is the comment thread on a subject matter. Well, what you're saying, I mean, obviously, we don't have the ability in the next door to pick and choose an individual comment that gets taken down or gets left up. So it's all or nothing on that. You either turn off comments at some point, or you take down the post. But if you're doing either of those things, you probably should be documenting it so that you have the record of it, because we don't reach into next door and control that. So that's where we put this recommendation: capture the thread, send it to your city email. That way we've got a permanent record. So I don't know if there are more questions. Otherwise, I think my suggestion is that we do go forward with modifying the one sentence, clean up a couple of typos on this, but we adopt this as drafted for now. And then we can work with city attorney who's now back from the trip. We can work some more on this if she has additional input. And if we have, we can either look into having the next city attorney provide input on this, or we could look at taking this out as an independent project to find kind of the best template for this anywhere in the state. We are breaking a little bit of new ground by pushing this out there with recommendations on how the council behaves, but we need to do that because our citizens have asked us to. That's fine.
Okay, so any more questions? No?
I just had a comment. And it should be clear, we're not trying to muzzle anybody from saying what they want to say. We're not trying to affect anybody's First Amendment rights if they want to speak on a topic or say something that they think is important. What we're trying to do is establish policies for the city council and for the city staff as to how they should act on social media. So
The whole purpose of this was to provide, well, one of the main purposes was to provide the city council an ability to have a social media presence and to reach out to the community and engage the community and invite commentary and opinion, because in fact we were elected to represent the community, and this is a great way to use something available to us to do so.
Okay, so can I have a motion to adopt this social media policy then with the
Excuse me.
modifications?
We need to be clear what the modifications are.
I wanted to make a comment if I could.
Go ahead.
Thank you. One thing I would like to encourage the council to take a look at are the polls that are available on Nextdoor. I was very interested in trying to use them, but again, without this policy that you're putting together, I was a little bit leery about doing so. And I didn't see anything in the report that talked about being able to put together a poll, but I know that you're always looking to get information from the residents. And a lot of times people won't spend the time to write a comment down, but they're more likely to check a box if you give them the option to do so. So I just wanted to just make that suggestion.
So if you could just go through exactly the edits.
Okay, so
there's a-
Let's wait for.
Well, I should just say as amended, we're just trying to collect them over here.
Okay.
Yeah, so, the, primary edit is in the second part, social media use, by council members and commissioners. Item 2, to remove the language that's between the square brackets, it says as alternative 2. So just to remove the full text that's between the square brackets.
And then in item 5 to correct the misspelling.
Yes,
The
there's a
only-
couple of them we saw, we'll
Yeah.
we'll get all those. The brackets where it starts as alternative 2.
Yes, through the end of that square bracket.
And we'll correct, there were a number of edits. Was there anything else?
That's all.
Okay. So with
Okay.
that, yes.
Okay, so, do I have a motion to accept the social media policy that the ad hoc committee with our city attorney's input have in front of us?
There's actually a resolution.
Oh,
So
there
we
is?
need to approve the resolution of the city council of the city of Montezuma rescinding resolution number 3612, which adopted the city social media policy and adopting a new social media policy.
Okay.
So moved.
Second? Okay, shall we keep moving?
Councilmember Alani,
Yes.
Councilmember Lawler,
Yes.
Councilmember Lupo,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler,
Yes.
Mayor Turner.
Yes.
Five vote passes 5-0.
Okay, so now let's go to item 11, which is city employee salary and benefits survey. So Terry, do you want to speak to that, please?
Yeah, well, as requested during the compilation of the operating and capital budget for this fiscal year, the city council requested that city staff reach out to a number of firms to request estimates for a salary survey. We did reach out to 4 firms, only 2 of which responded. And staff has included as attachments these 2 proposals. One was very detailed and the other less so. But the main components of the surveys are whether you want to just do salary only or whether you also want to do salary and benefits. The more detailed proposal from Coffin Associates was a bit more expensive than the other proposal. The other firm, which is Regional Government Services. I did receive, I did talk to other persons in HR and other cities, because I don't know either of these groups, and both of the persons I contacted said that either of these are reputable firms.
So the first one is regional services and number 2 is.
Number 2 is Regional Government Services. Coffin Associates.
Staff would recommend that it's really the salary and comp, because it's, to know the full, benefits and total overall package that all employees receive at various, locations, it's really best to do both, so that's what we would recommend.
So any questions from the council?
Yes. I have a question. So Terry, the second one was obviously kind of far less detailed, but also appeared to be less expensive. But you're saying that as far as you're concerned, it looks like the second one is equally qualified to do the work?
I would feel comfortable with either one of them doing a similar job just as well.
What makes me nervous though is they do say it's very ballpark, so we don't really have an exact number that we can hold them to. And the lack of detail does make me wonder.
I mean, it's possible if you were to go with that one, I could just make it clear to them that what they sent us as a ballpark is what we're looking to spend. whatever the council decides to do.
So do you want us tonight to decide on whether we go with number 1 or number 2?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, it's also possible you could go back to Koff Associates, who has a very detailed statement of work and what they're proposing in terms of deliverables, and see if their price is a little bit negotiable, right?
Yeah.
This is what they offer, this is what
Okay.
it's
Okay.
$140 an hour, so you get down to, whatever. But,
I like the Friend Associates, because then you can look at not only the salary, but the benefits. Do you want to give PERS, do you want to give 401k, do you want to do, all these options?
The other thing I like about this Koff Associates is it'd be nice to establish a relationship with these guys in that they do provide some additional other services that might be useful, since we contract out a lot of other, a fair number of, competencies. Might be nice to have this organization just on call.
Okay, anything else?
So I hear from the majority that I will contact Koff and see if they can reduce their cost. If they cannot, do you still want me to proceed with them? Yes. Okay, all right.
Okay, so let's move to item 12, designation of voting delegates for the League of Cities, California Cities Annual Conference, October 16 to 18. Do I have a volunteer? Mayor Pro Tem Lawler?
Yeah, I was also interested.
Okay. So you only need 2, right? Carrie?
Well, typically, I think the city sends 1, correct?
Yeah, we can,
I mean, can we send an alternate as well?
yeah, I think you can have actually up to 2
Okay.
voting.
We just,
One voting into one.
city council just need to be mindful that there is a limited budget for the council to attend things, events and so forth, so this will be our first expenditure this year.
Probably, the council needs to designate the voting delegate and
Right.
alternate.
We need a formal action for that, but I'm just speaking to the budget in general. But yeah, this will be the first item that we're going to potentially go to this year, and we only have 1 new council person, so that's likely the only person, we send for that training, so we're not spending nearly as much as we did last year. So in terms of the budget, sending 2 persons should be.
Okay. So good. Then now we have the designation of the voting delegate.
We got the mayor pro tem, so that's voting time.
Go ahead. Sure.
I'm happy to.
Okay, good. So let's move on. Let's now move to.
As the alternate.
That's the alternate.
Yes. So, do you need 2 alternates? Just 1, right?
Just 1. I would make a motion.
Okay, so do we have a motion then to have Mayor Pro Tem Lawler as the voting delegate and Councilmember Elahi as the alternate? And that both of them will attend the League of California Cities 2019 Annual Conference, October 18 to 19, 16 to 18.
Just send us a reminder.
Is there, is there a council meeting in those days?
October 16th to the 18th, I believe it is. Is that 18th or on the 15th?
No.
The night, the day before.
So good. Do I have a motion? We have a motion, right?
Yes, we have a motion.
Want to
I
have a second?
I have a second, a motion by Councilmember Leopold and a second by Councilmember Elahi. So Councilmember Elahi,
Yes.
Councilmember LaBouvet,
Yes.
Councilmember Leopold,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lawler,
Yes.
Mayor Turner.
Yes. Okay, so now let's move to committee commission reports. Anybody wants to make a commission or committee report? No? I do, I have one. I spoke with Chief DeSena about emergency preparedness, and we particularly talked about setting up NICPs, neighborhood incident command posts for Montecito, because the only NICP we have today is the one in Dave's Avenue. Los Gatos has 18, we have 1. I don't think that having an NICP is gonna be the problem, right? An NICP, by the way, for those of you who don't know, contains ham radios, they have speaker phones in there, they'll have access to radio systems, they will have medical supplies, directions to the different facilities within Montecito in case of emergency, like fire or earthquake. The problem is the people that can access NICPs have to be CERT trained. And that's the problem with Montecito. We don't have enough people in CERT training. So I would encourage the council to set a good example and actually volunteer to do CERT training. There's one in November. I have recruited 7 or 8 people in Neighborhood Watch, but that's a different mindset. They are not the leaders when you have an emergency. A CERT leader will have to sort out the bodies from those injured. So you have to have certain skill sets. So I would encourage you guys to become CERT leaders, please. That's what I have. Anybody else? Okay, so next order of business is city manager's report.
So just wanted to give you an update on a couple of things. The city picnic is August 24th, so encouraging all of the council that can attend to be there, as well as all the residents in the city that can. When does the RSVP close?
Friday.
This Friday. And just to let you all know, I think all of the city staff will be there as well, with their families, so we're trying to, get folks from city staff to be able to interact with the residents, so the residents can get to know the staff a little bit better, staff can get to know the residents a little bit better, so we have got a lot. We have invited, of course, a whole bunch of different groups, like we did last year, like the fire department, the police department, the Silicon Valley Clean Energy coming, and Clean Water Program. Can you think of anybody else that's coming for sure?
Inspire, I believe the library is coming.
Oh, yeah. They'll bring the bookmobile or whatever. So so far we've got, not quite as many as we had last year signed up, but it could be probably because the date is in August. It's not as good of a date as we had in the past. But yeah, I think overall it's going to be very successful. There was just a little bit quick, we've had some inquiries from the public about this year's pavement improvement program and the street resurfacing. There was some issues here and there, and the city engineer worked with the contractor to be sure that all this has been addressed. So from our perspective, it looks like everything has been taken care of. Now, do always keep in mind that with all these projects, there is a 1-year warranty. So between the time the work was completed and 1 year, if the defects arise, it is the contractor's responsibility to make repairs, and those are at no cost to the city.
Just on that, I guess there was a newspaper article about how much more money the state has as a result of the increase in the gas tax.
Yes, and so we
They're
do.
rolling out money, are we getting
Yeah,
that?
we do get that, and actually, the first 2 years, which was last fiscal year, or the 2 prior fiscal years, the city did do a fairly large transfer of general fund reserves to supplement the funds needed for the pavement management program. However, for the next 3 years, we are likely to use only the funds that we're collecting from SB1 and the other different revenue sources, so the city will not have to make a transfer from the general fund, unless you want to do additional money.
I think that's the point. Maybe we do need to accelerate that if there's more money coming in.
Well, there wouldn't be any more, I mean, the city would have to supplement with current fund. Now, as I think I mentioned to you before, we are required to update the survey that's done that gives us the pavement condition index of all the streets, and that's happening now. And that's going to give us a good idea of the work that we did, how much it improved, to make sure we're still on track, and it will help us move forward with what we want to do over the next 3 years. And that's happening now. Anything else on that? There were questions regarding, just wanted to update you on the property down the street, 18081 Los Gatos, Saratoga Road. It's where the 3-lot subdivision is in the burned down house. We have been working diligently with the, mostly with the realtor because the property owner is absent. They're not in the state and they're very difficult to get a hold of, to try to improve the condition of the property because there are many issues there. They have cleared some of the weeds. There's still a lot of brush that's just kind of hanging around. So I actually walked up there this morning to see if they had done all the things that we talked to them 2 weeks ago about. And I'd say for the most part they had done some, but not most. So tomorrow when the code enforcement officer is in, and I've already informed the realtor, we will be proceeding with citing the property. I'm pretty sure they're going to get over there this week and finish up with what they were supposed to be doing, but I believe it's in our best interest to really incite them, and in that way we have, the force of compliance behind it now. We've been more than patient with them trying, been more than patient with getting them to do the things we need to do. So I just wanted to say that. I think that was it.
How about cleargov.com?
Oh, yes, as I noted in my memo too, we have been done the kickoff meeting for both ClearGov and the 2 projects we're working on with Camino. And the finance officer provided a lot of the data that they were looking for, and they are currently working on putting together the public portal that will have access to our website. I don't have a date when it will go live yet, but we definitely got started on it, which is good. And we're also learning about some more potential opportunities where we might be able to use it for other things. A lot of the stuff that they use it for, we don't do. We don't build new community centers, we don't build new parks, but there is a possibility that we might be able to use this platform for other purposes. I'm sorry, there was one other thing. We are still in discussions with the post office, with the fire department over using the building next door. They have been by here a total of 3 times in the last month. So I think they're still very much interested in potentially using it, but they told me to still wait on bringing a formal request to the city council because they're still not quite sure. But my gut is telling me that they're likely to say that they would like to be able to do that. So as soon as I hear from them, we'll be able to consider. And that's all I have.
I just, the ClearGov, when I got the demo of that tool, it has a very good ability to filter for similar municipalities.
Yes, and we're choosing
that, and we use that as input into our salary survey.
Yeah, no, we're picking, they want us, I think that they have 2 parts to it. One is just sort of how do you compare to all the cities, but they can also narrow that much further down to something that's much more comparable to our city. And so we're working with that.
And we've already paid for that service, right?
Yes, as part of the budget, we put them in.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. So now let's go to future agenda items.
There was one item that I thought maybe we should look at is the water rates and what's happening with increasing water rates. I know Rishi in Saratoga is very active on that. Maybe we can have him come down and tell us what, if anything, we need to do to ensure that water rates will go for our customers. It's working fairly rapidly.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. There's been pieces of mail that have been coming through, and the city council, people are very concerned about the water rates.
Anything else?
I have one item.
Mhm.
So I want to make a little bit of a statement about what we accomplished today. In today's meeting, agenda item 3, subdivision and zoning code amendments, change the Monte Sereno Municipal Code such that hillside and scenic corridor subdivision development projects are first reviewed by the Site and Architecture Commission before going to the City Council for approval. This is important for Monte Sereno residents because the Site and Architecture Commission is comprised of land use, architecture, building, engineering, and common sense experts that live in Monte Sereno and have a resident perspective for the type of development that preserves community character and adheres to all Monte Sereno guidelines. Unfortunately, agenda item 3 didn't go far enough, and we have more work to do to ensure that all development proposals have site and architecture commission review. I would like to propose a policy resolution to expand site and architecture review to all zoning, plan development, subdivision, or any other future defined development types.
Do we have a growing issue here?
Well, this is.
No, let me ask a question.
No, but I do have some comments about it once you finish it.
Okay.
So the intent of this resolution is just to define a path forward and, a priority by the council. If there's agreement, so far this is just my opinion, to direct staff to go in this direction. So number one, direct that the following resolution be placed on the next city council agenda for approval. And number two, direct that appropriate Mines Reno municipal code changes be promptly proposed to the city council for approval. So there is work to do underneath the hood here, in that the resolution is not enough, right? We still have to go make updates to the municipal code and so forth in order to make this binding. So the resolution would only be directive, it would be directive. So I'll just quickly read the resolution because it's quite straightforward. It says, whereas the city councils are required by the municipal code to evaluate proposals for zoning, subdivisions, plan developments, or any development type defined in the future within the city, whereas most city council members are new to the process and inexperienced in such evaluations, whereas subject matter expertise in this area resides in the Site and Architecture Committee, be it resolved that the City Council directs the Site and Architecture Committee to conduct reviews of all zoning and development proposals to provide their conclusions, concerns, advice, and recommendations to the Council to support and assist the Council in conducting its evaluation of these proposals. Again, this last paragraph, the goal here is to set a goal for the city staff to move forward in this direction. So this is a directive resolution. If we need to wordsmith this a bit to make it more appropriate, I'm very open to that and happy to work with someone to do that. But I would just like to set this as a priority for the council if there's agreement.
Kristen, you wanted to say something?
So at the last council meeting, we were directed to work on coming back with a report on the difference between our Site and Architecture Commission and the Planning Commission. And staff is working on that. As Councilmember LaBay mentioned, does require an ordinance because our Site and Architecture duties are spelled out in the municipal code. So the only way to expand those duties would be to adopt an amendment to the municipal code. That does require a public hearing, which is 10-day notice. So there's a lot of steps that we need to go through. Staff is working on it. We're proceeding, and the resolution itself really doesn't change anything. It doesn't give the Site and Architecture any authority. The only way they get authority is through an ordinance. So if the council's interested in bringing back this item, it would really just be a statement of your interest. It wouldn't make any changes. But I think staff already understands the interest that the council has, and we're working on it.
I think there's one clarification that I wanted to make in that, in the last meeting, I think the discussion kind of went down a little bit of a rat hole in that we started talking about, or I asked a question of what would it take to cover all development types, similar to what we were doing with agenda item 3. And the response from Ms. Hamilton was maybe we need to consider a planning commission, and then some discussion progressed around, well, what is a planning commission, what's the difference, yada, yada, yada. So it kind of went in that direction. I just wanted to clarify that the intent of the initiative is really to just cover all development types by the Site and Architecture Committee, not necessarily to pursue a planning commission. If a planning commission is what's required to accomplish that task, then so be it. But let's not go down a rat hole of talking about planning commission, and let's be clear on what the actual objective is. That's the purpose of this resolution.
So the future agenda item that was already proposed at the last meeting was to come back to you with a report on the differences. Under currently under our municipal code, the Site and Architecture Commission deals with site and architecture issues. In Montessori, the majority of the development projects that you see include a site development permit. Very rarely do we see something that doesn't, except tonight, for example, we have the variance. It did not include a site development permit. That was somewhat of an anomaly because it was really just correcting an error when previously it did have a site development permit. But the majority of the projects in the city are site development permits anyway. But the issue is just if you want to expand that role, you can call it what you want to call it, but if its duties are expanded to a certain degree, then it requires some additional steps. So that's the discussion. Our understanding is that was the point of the discussion that was requested, and that's what we're working on.
But you recognize that there was a loophole, basically, so when you're talking about site development permits are already commonly reviewed by site and architecture, when it came to the hillside and scenic corridor subdivision, they also had site development permits, yet there was an exclusion in terms of site and architecture review. Based on the subdivision code, but other subdivisions, one that is not sitting on the Highway 9 corridor or in some hillside is currently uncovered or is ambiguous. And so those are the types of things that I would be interested in clarifying.
And I believe staff understands that we're working on.
So,
So it
that was
sounds,
such.
it sounds like the two of you, I mean, Councilman Lavalley, it sounds like, I mean, what you want, you've spelled it out pretty clearly. Maybe you'll be able to share that with the city attorney and have some back and forth to see if it's useful for us to have that come to us at the next meeting. I certainly don't mind having it come back if it's something that's useful to us and then useful to staff, but what brings that together, because what you're talking about was directively then to go and look at what ordinances need to change and all of those things.
No, not really going that far. So basically, we're just setting an objective for the city staff to work on. So no different than one of our annual goals to say that we feel strongly about this issue and we would like it worked on.
Right, and I to understand site and architecture to review just about everything before council.
So not just about, it's everything. So it's subdivisions on Highway 9, subdivisions anywhere in Montecito, as well as all developments, right? That's what you're asking for?
Yes.
And variances also or not?
Variances also. I mean, site and architecture actually ruled on that variance, or they ruled on approving that project originally. You know, it would have been nice to go to them and say, hey, what do you think about this now, before it came here.
So the question is, are they turning it into a planning commission and you were going to get back to us?
Well, we don't even know what a planning commission means.
They were going to get back to us to tell us what the planning
Right, so
commission
that was
is
the
and what's
point,
that.
right, of the agenda, and that has already been requested, that staff is already working on,
Okay.
is to come back to and explain how their duties could be expanded. If you included everything, what are the implications of that? Are there other developments that you maybe don't need their expertise, or that you think you do? And then also that means revising the ordinance to make it very clear that it's not just site and architecture, it would include a variety of subjects. So that's what staff is working on.
So what's the negative about looking at the planning commission and then approving this resolution that we have here? I mean, why can't we
There's no
do that?
negative, it's just a step that's unnecessary because we're already looking at it. And so it's one item that we'll be doing, we'll be preparing a staff report and preparing the resolution for you to tell us to do something that we're already doing.
I guess the difference is this one has an end date for when we can do it. And what you're proposing has no end date yet, right?
The request didn't give us a specific date, but we are working on it, and we could report back at the next meeting of when it would be going to you. It is a public hearing, so it takes some additional time. And we have to have the work done before we can notice the public hearing. So it's one additional step that we wouldn't necessarily have in others, but we could report back to you on the time when we're planning on bringing it forward.
So can we take that?
No, but I was just gonna say, I mean, it just seems to me that even though it might be unnecessary, I don't think it hurts hurts to state our intent and hold ourselves and city staff accountable and just make sure that we get this done. I mean, I think that's the,
Yeah, it's just a priority issue of, you know, you
Yeah.
only have so many people, and so if this is more important, then,
And it could be a matter of, so, I mean, Kirsten does a lot of the work, but Jeannie does a lot of it as well. So, I mean, Jeannie is typically does not have a lot of spare time. She has to deal with all the applications that come in. And, you know, we do provide incredible turnaround times. But, you know, tying our hands on it must be done by a certain date. We're not going to, Jeannie will then have to delay other projects for people that are coming in, for remodels or new houses. You know, so she's going to have to work with me on, you know, prioritizing.
So let me ask this again, because there's something I'm not getting here. So by approving this resolution the way it is today, the way Councilmember LeBouvet.
you're not approving it today, so
No,
he's
not
asking
today,
we bring it back
but
the next
in the next meeting. Does it require extra work from Jeannie then, for this? Because you said something
Well,
about.
not for the
Jeannie was-
resolution, but if you're gonna put a date on when it has to be before you, yes, that's putting a constraint on her time. So if you're saying, you know, if the resolution says, we expect the ordinance to be returned by such and such a date, then I have to, you know, work with Jeannie to figure out how you can work that in your workload. Is that gonna affect the project she's currently working on, which is, you know, most of the additions and houses and stuff, and if it does, she's gonna have to push back on those people.
So item number 2, I said, direct that appropriate Maestro municipal code changes are made promptly. So promptly is a variable word, but I would like to hear what the prioritization trade-offs are. But I think in my opinion, passing this is giving very clear instructions to the city staff. This is a priority for us. It's a priority for the community. We want to try to get it done as promptly as possible. And so I don't think it hurts to be very explicit about that direction.
I think the city staff has got that message loud and clear.
That's why it should be in writing, though.
But, no, I understand it. The resolution will probably get adopted. I don't like the whereas clauses which say we don't know what we're doing. So I would like to take those out.
Okay.
The inexperienced part about it.
Yeah, if we're gonna talk about the specifics, so if
I think we
the
have to
majority
talk
of you
about it
want us
next
to bring
time.
it back, we can bring it back at the next meeting.
So yeah, let's bring it back next meeting and talk about
Yeah,
it.
let's go ahead and do that.
Okay. I think that's, again, I'm very open to line edits.
The other thing I want to comment on that is, I mean, you obviously you want to push this through, you've got it in mind, you've got comments on, but in terms of prioritizing, I want to prioritize the objective standards for review that we need to get in, and that's far more important. Site and architecture, we can get to any time, but objective standards, we need to get done before the state does something different. So I think we need to talk about balancing.
Yeah, I think it
those
would be
priorities.
nice to have a conversation about what is all on the city planner's plate and help prioritize that. I think that would be a good discussion to have on a regular basis.
And I don't know if there's urgency on this thing. There's nothing that's now going to the site commission or coming to us that should go to the site commission. Is there
No, but
something?
by that time it'd be too late. I mean, look how
No,
long it
I'm talking about the next 3 months or so. Is there anything happening there?
and look how long it took to get the item number 3 done. It took literally 6 months.
Yeah,
To make
so
a
I
few
brought that up in
paragraphs change.
February.
Oh, okay, well, we got. Hey, anything else?
So-
And that was a relatively easy change. This will be a much more complicated change.
Okay. Any more?
I have one more that I do want to bring up, which is in dealing with the social media policy, we discovered at the last minute that there was a prior resolution that no one even remembered, and it was only 3 years old that it had previously been done. I think we need to consider how to work with either our agenda or with staff to make sure that we ultimately move the PDF copies of the resolutions and any other city actions that ought to be searchable by word on our website to our website. So we may need to look at IT solutions, we may need to look at something else. I know that PDFs have been scanned and are more and more technologically available to the city clerk. But I noticed that the last one that was forwarded to me on one of them was not yet word searchable. So we're going to need to OCR everything, and then we're going to need something that's word searchable. So I think it's an IT project. I don't know if that's something that staff will maybe be able to work in here, or if it's something that council needs to allocate budget or resources.
Well, it may, I mean, I don't say this is really an agenda item yet, but I think I talked to you about it, didn't I? The design, yeah, because other cities I've worked for do that. But we just have to determine, how we will implement it. And it's not a difficult thing, but it may require some budget.
Right. So I'm bringing it up because it needs to kind of move forward. Maybe our new person, I know you're working on it, Larry, so that's great. And if you need anything from us to keep it moving forward, I just put it out here as something that I did want to start tracking, so that somewhere down the road, everything we have that's a city resolution or a city, you can search ordinances and municipal code, but we can't yet search our own resolutions historically to see what the councils in the past have done versus what we're doing right now.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure.
With regard to the objective standards, I believe that's already on the forecasted agenda list for September. So hopefully, any directives that we're making now shouldn't really affect the prioritization of that September deliverable.
On another note, I have a quick question. Kirsten, at the last meeting, you mentioned that you would have an update on housing legislation. I don't know if you did or not.
We're bringing that back, we moved it to September 6th, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, it was listed on the upcoming agenda block that I sent you for next week.
Oh, yeah.
So that also includes all the work on the objective standards?
No, this is just regarding housing legislation.
This is the work for the ad hoc committee that Councilmember Elahi and I are on, and then we moved it over to person so that she can do her blessing.
So did I misspeak or not?
No. So, are we done? Okay, so our next meeting is August 20th at 7 o'clock at City Hall. Since we have no further business, let's move to adjourn. Meeting is adjourned.